Hello and welcome to the Colts Cover 2 podcast. This is coming to you a day early this week because everything is coming to you early this week. It's Tuesday and I'm already thinking about the fact that I fly tomorrow. You're in I think you're in a spot now where you fly in less than 24 hours.
Yep, tomorrow morning.
Everything is rushed. The Colts play on Thursday. This is just an aside real quick. We can come back to this, but this is a rough road game. The NFL does not. We've talked a lot in the past. Maybe not. Nate hasn't been here as long, but about how the NFL doesn't like to give the Colts help with the schedule. But that in Frank Reich's 5 years as head coach, they've been on the road for Thursday Night Football 4 times. And I think
not a short trip either.
I think being on the road is a significant issue on Thursday because the whole thing with Thursday is there's no time to recover, and then you take part of it by putting them on a plane. And so being on the road is really tough. They're 2-2 on Thursday night games. One of those wins was at home. They've generally played well in Thursday night games, but yeah, Denver's tough. I mean,
you got the altitude.
You have the altitude. It's significant. So that's what's coming up on Thursday. But just to get back to where we've been with this podcast, did you bring a mascot?
I did. It's going to take a little bit of time.
That's 2 weeks in a row
to get set up.
2 weeks in a row.
Give a shout out to Clark who helped.
More importantly, though, do you have choreography like you did with the Redwoods? Because that was.
Oh, we'll see how this lives up to it.
I know. I gotta keep talking. I
gotta keep talking. It takes a little bit of setup for this one. It's a little bit more than little trees this time.
Okay. Well, you know what? I can do my mascot while he gets it set up. Mine are my hiking shoes. We're going to Denver. This is the opposite of when I trashed Jacksonville before that trip. Denver is probably my favorite city in the NFL because of the mountains. I mean, there's a lot of other things about Denver. I interned out there when I was a kid in college, and spent a couple months out there. And I kind of like that the city is so far from everything that you have everything available that you'd want. Like every concert comes there. You have every professional sporting team. And then on top of that, you have the mountains, which the Rocky Mountains to me are the best thing there. So I'm planning to hike before the game on Thursday and don't really care about how tired I get beforehand because we don't have mountains in Indiana. The other thing is in terms of these are the ones. This is probably not the right ones. There's probably some hiking enthusiasts out there who would tell me these are the wrong ones. This is what I like to wear. They're the 5-finger ones. I like to have a little bit of toe hold. They're hard on the bottom. So if I want to boulder a little bit, I can do that. And the Colts connection is just simply that they're at the bottom of a very big hill.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to be hard to get up it. And they need to have their tools with them, and they don't have some of those tools. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So that's my mascot is we're going to probably my favorite place in the country, and it's one of the only times that these come out.
It is very emblematic, the uphill climb, and Frank Reich loves to use that
metaphor. I know he used the mountain thing. I think I'm going to get crap for that. I think I'm going to get crap for that when the people listen to the podcast, but I'm fine with it.
Well, we just got to play to the brand, and Frank Reich has a brand for whether you love it or hate it, and but it is fitting.
You know what the answer is to that question.
Well, I enjoy it sometimes, but I'm going to hike too. I'm actually staying in Denver. I've never been to Colorado, and I'm flying out tomorrow morning. I'm not hiking the day of the game because I'm not a psycho, but I'm crazy enough to hike the whole weekend though. I'm going Saturday morning, Sunday morning. This is like the mini bye for us and for players too. Players are going to like it. Coaches. Well, they won't like it as much if they lose, but they will like a few days off, especially with the late bye in the season. So I like that one. I got to get myself some better hiking shoes.
In Colorado, you hike literally every day. It doesn't matter what you have going on that day. It's one of the other things I like about it. One of the things I'm most jealous about is that there are people who live on the Front Range who wake up, do like a 45-minute hike that gets like 800 feet of elevation, and you get to sit there. You go up to the top, you look over, watch the sunrise over Denver, and then they just go back down. That's their morning workout. That's not fair.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. It's we don't get to do that as much here, but so it'll be nice.
Yeah, there's no mountains here for me to climb.
There's not. So mine's a little bit different here.
Is that dirt?
This is dirt. And I'm going to spread it here on this little piece of plastic so we don't get too messy, but pretty much it's not too dissimilar to the general idea you laid out here where they got a hole to dig out of here, the Colts do, but specifically I'm looking at the offensive line is kind of what I'm going to make a lot of this podcast about, because as I go through this team and I'm trying to figure out what we missed, what we're so wrong on, why this doesn't feel right, I think everything comes back to the offensive line. It's not that they're the only ones struggling, but I really think if they go from as bad as they've been to as good as I think they can be and that the team thinks they can be, a lot of this gets fixed. So
this looks like, and I am not a green thumb at all, but this looks like gardening dirt. Like
it is gardening dirt.
Are you going to plant something on the podcast? We only have 45 minutes. I don't know if anything can grow
Sand
that
might be more fun. Like I thought about doing sand because that's basically what Jonathan Taylor has to run through at the moment. But instead it's like there's just so much dirt out there. There's so much – like if you talk to this offensive line right now, they're kind of beating themselves up. And, and you could say they should. But also I think sometimes I think they're in their own head a little bit. That's why the struggles have deepened as much as they have. So they got to just get through here. And the thing I keep thinking about, I wrote about it after the game, and Frank Reich brought it up yesterday, is that they are missing their little friend who helped the offensive line so much, which was Jack Doyle. And what he would do is he would drag across the formation. Pretty much they'd do a run call, and if it was sort of between the tackles, he would kind of cut across the formation and dig out these linebackers. And it was like not only was he so good at it, but he was so consistent. He could ad-lib throughout a game if the linebackers were moving and wherever they were blitzing from. He just seemed to pick it up. Jonathan Taylor had a feel for it, a trust for it. And so they got to start scooping some of these guys out here. So that's like kind of the dirt that's in their way. This is like a linebacker in the hole right here. This is like Josie Jewell coming through this week. They got to like get it out of the way so that Jonathan Taylor can run, because when Jonathan Taylor can actually run, when he feels confident in the blocking he's got, I mean, this is the best dude. This is the Colt right here, and he's stuck in the dirt. And we got to get him out of here, man. Like, or else they're going to just bury him. Like, if they don't get this figured out, he's got an ankle injury. He's getting stuck in trenches. He's getting stuck under piles. He's fumbling. Like, this is where Jonathan Taylor is at the moment.
He just tilted over. That's the ankle. Or the toe. One of the two.
Yeah, it's hard to hold on to the ball when you got that much dirt on you, too. So that's kind of where he's at.
The thing I appreciate most about this is that you skipped the first couple weeks, and then it was because you were working on your choreography for your mascot for the rest of the time.
Yeah, it's like that was like preseason.
It's next level. Yeah, it's
like
gone next level. You like watched what I did, and you're like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put a number to this. Like we're gonna do some extra to this.
Oh yeah. I got to try and live up to it every week. So hopefully this team
set the bar kind of high.
Hopefully this team keeps giving me new storylines. I don't want to do this, I don't want to bury Jonathan Taylor in dirt every week. Like that's kind of sad, and that's kind of where I'm at with team right now. Is that they've got. I've covered 3 teams now, and Jonathan Taylor is the best football player I've ever seen live on a team I cover. It was Darius Slay. It's now Jonathan Taylor. The problem is it doesn't look that way right now because he's buried. This is like there's just that little head poking through. And I see Jonathan Taylor when he comes out and he talks to us, and he's got that bright smile, and he's got that bright personality, and it's still in there. And you just think if they can just get him clean, if they can just open it up, we could see this guy come out of the dirt and run wild like he's run. And I just think even one big game from Jonathan Taylor, one game where he feels confident in the blocking, he gets free, he can set up a move, he can cut outside, and he can run out in the open field. He's the engine of their offense when it's running well. He's their horsepower. And so they've got to get back to that point, because without that, this team doesn't have an identity. They don't have something to lean on when it's tough. They don't have a way to keep it from going down 24-3 early in the game. It's all about getting Jonathan Taylor free and letting him roam, and this needs to be the week that it starts.
The running game, it kind of goes to where I wanted to take this podcast. I think the most concerning thing to me right now, and the reason that it feels I am not as read into things or read into what people say as a lot of other reporters are, but the thing that I think that makes this feel different to me is that the Colts offense isn't even doing the stuff well that we're used to them doing well under Reich. Pass protection has traditionally been one of their strengths. Protecting the ball has been one of their strengths. The running game has been one of their strengths. They're struggling in all of those right now. And then
turnovers would be the other one I'd add on defense.
On defense, yeah, but I'm kind of sticking with the offense right now because it seems like they've been the worst. The defense, I thought, got off a little easy for Sunday, but they did come back in the second half and play pretty well, and they have limited yards for the most part this season.
Wait, this little baby horse, I'm going to say that's Alec Pierce. He's a little rookie, and he's starting to show some signs, and if they can get him a little bit more clean, if they make everything more clean, he can kind of roam, and he and Jonathan Taylor can be like...
Why is he yellow?
I don't know. This is the
it's
options
a little too
we
yellow
had here.
It's a little too yellow for a horse.
I don't know. He's been out in the sun too much.
I don't think that's what happens to horses when they sit out in the sun too much.
He's a golden horse here. Like this, Alec Pierce has been a golden horse the past couple weeks. He looks awesome. They just got to make it matter more. They got to get back to where he is a complementary piece of the big-time horse, which is Jonathan Taylor. So we'll just put him there.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that's most concerning to me, and I think the root cause of that is if it's what we've been talking about for a long time. What you said you wanted to talk about on this pod, but I don't think that after 4 years of establishing those things as trends, that something disconnected in terms of a game planning or preparation type of thing. I don't think that's the most logical answer to that. That they suddenly forgot, that Reich suddenly forgot how to do these things that he's done literally with every other quarterback, with every other offense that he's had. I think the more likely explanation is what everyone kind of sees. The obvious thing is the offensive line. And Reich came as close as we've ever heard him to admitting personnel deficiencies yesterday when he was talking about the run game, when he said he wasn't just talking about Doyle, but he also said there's two other guys that we replaced on that offensive line in relation to why the running game's not going. They don't know what to do at right guard. They tried Will Fries, not a whole lot of success in the run game. Left tackle Matt Pryor has been very inconsistent, and ultimately, I think that's the biggest thing, is that this team has been able to figure out its offensive line really before this season, from the sixth or seventh game of the 2018 season when Anthony Costanzo came back from an injury, until the end of the 2020 season. But to some degree last year too. I mean, this was still a very good run game last year. Taylor had a lot of room to run even against stack boxes. They had that. They had that baseline. That was supposed to be the baseline that they were playing with. It's supposed to be the baseline that Reich is working with. The decisions that they made there to elevate guys who were backups and not bring in other competition, we've all talked about it ad nauseum. It keeps coming up, but it's the story of the season right now. That unit is not what it's supposed to be. And I think that's why you see some of these hallmarks of the offense failing in the ways that they are. And honestly, I actually think that there's a world here where some of the stuff we've seen out of the passing game would signal that they could be successful with a shift to more of a passing attack early. But the problem is the turnovers are outweighing that. Matt Ryan's turnovers are outweighing that. And, I mean, that's tied to the offensive line as well. The fumbles specifically are tied to the offensive line as well and not being able to protect. But at some point, the experienced quarterback has to just protect the football. I know he's been hit a ton, but at some point it's just built up so much. He's got to protect the football. And to me, it's the point now where the individual explanations for each turnover don't matter as much as the overall number. Because it's 8 through 4 games. I wrote about this the other day. He's way ahead of any pace that any quarterback has had under Reich. Very different playing styles, very different turnover histories for all of those quarterbacks. With almost all of them, turnovers came down with Reich. With Ryan, they're up. He's on a pace that he's on a pace that no one should be on, frankly. I mean, he's on pace for 34 turnovers in 17 games. Now, you would expect some regression to the mean, just given history, but we just haven't seen it yet. We keep seeing these mistakes. We keep seeing the turnovers happen, and again, this is another thing where, like, sort of me taking things face level, like, until we see it, it's hard to imagine it going differently.
Yeah, it's uncharacteristic for a Frank Reich offense to have those turnovers from the quarterback. It's also uncharacteristic for Matt Ryan, who's done this for 15 years, and he's never fumbled more than 11 times. And he's been hit before. I mean, he was the most sacked quarterback back in 2019.
Sacked more than 40 times in each of the last 4 seasons.
But the thing that is the one number that is like so monstrous, there are 2 numbers for Matt Ryan that are complete career outliers at this point. It's the turnovers and it's the yards he's taking on sacks. So it's not just the sacks, it's how deep and destructive they are. And I just think if you take Matt Ryan's track record and you take Frank Reich's track record with offense and you say, why are these 2 things completely not working? There's 2 reasons to me. One is the logical fact that they're new. They're working together. There's going to be some growing pains. That explains a little bit of it. The bigger thing to me, though, is still the offensive line. It doesn't excuse Matt Ryan's ball security. He's got to learn to hold on to the ball better when he's getting hit. Some of the miscommunications, he had 3 picks in the Jaguars game. Those were 3 of his 5. And then he had one that I don't really blame him for last week when it got tipped at the line, and then one other. So he had one really terrible game for picks. It's mostly been fumbles, though. And again, there's been one quarterback hit more than Matt Ryan this season. It's Carson Wentz with Commanders, which is kind of ironic. But that was never the plan for a 37-year-old quarterback, never the plan with an offensive line paid more than anyone in football. And I've been tough on the O-line, but the more that I look at this and I think what is going wrong here, and there's just something disconnected between specifically the 6 guys who are trusted with blocking the most, which would be 5 offensive linemen and then a tight end. And last year that tight end was Jack Doyle, and Frank Reich brought that up. That's a huge loss. But that alone, and I think even new starters at left tackle and right guard shouldn't explain this, because well, Matt Pryor's not perfect, neither was Eric Fisher, and they run blocked really, really well last year. They had 500 more rushing yards for Jonathan Taylor almost than any other back in football. Mark Lewinsky and Chad Reed did a very nice job at right guard, but that alone, the drop-off from these solid, decent starters at right guard at an insulated position between the center and the right tackle that you trust so much shouldn't be leading to all of this. And so there are certainly one-on-one some physical deficiencies we've seen. They made the change at right guard with Danny Pinter to Will Fries to kind of combat that. I still think a lot of this goes back to sort of mental and connection issues, is that a lot of it was the free rushers and the blitzes they were facing. They didn't seem to know they were coming. And then in the run game, what Frank Reich talked a lot about, what I got out of his answer was that they are not teaching it the way they need to teach it to get new starters comfortable with starters that they trust. And what's happening is the starters they trust are sort of overcompensating or not trusting the new guys either, and no one's playing at their best. And if they're not playing at their best in the run game, they can't play at their best in the pass game, because that's when all of a sudden there is some carryover between the confidence you play with, the energy, the feel from establishing a dominance in run blocking and carrying that over to confidence and feel for the guys around you in pass blocking. And so there's a fix here, and I think Frank Reich, I think he's a confident, positive guy. He seems to think he came off to me like he knows what the issue is, the central issue is, and he's got to go back sort of in the weeds of how they develop a game plan, how they're teaching and developing this throughout a week. And the thing is, to get you in the weeds of how offensive game planning goes, there's often just a separate mode for the offensive play caller, the coordinator, that's more of like the passing game specialist, which is Reich, and what the offensive line is doing, because the offensive line coach, they design the run game. They design the run scheme. The blocking scheme is built by the offensive line coach, and then the offensive coordinator is calling plays, with that, the idea of that being built up. It's not working. They have to go back to what's not working. And I just look at an offensive line that has had 5 guys out there consistently since the spring. None of them that we know of are really dealing with injuries. Bernard Raymond did, but he's a backup. They're not teaching this the right way, and I'm just going to put it back on Chris Strasser and Kevin Mawai to get it done, because since they've taken over this offensive line, the Reich's first year with Dave, how do we pronounce his name? DeGuglielmo.
Yeah,
that was the year that they had the fewest sacks in the NFL. Played really, really well, and they've had good offensive lines, but they're just not trending in the right direction. Last year was a step back. Late in the season was a big step back, and this year was a monster step back. And I'm just saying, I've seen this exact thing play out in Detroit, where they had a super talented offensive line. They dumped money on guys like Rick Wagner and T.J. Lang. They had Graham Glasgow. They had first-round picks. They ended up having to trade a lot of those guys and see them leave, and they all thrived elsewhere. And when it's a situation like all these guys are underperforming and we know they can be better and we know they're not healthy, I just think that there's got to be a common denominator. It's something in the way they're teaching and developing and cultivating this group that's not working. And when I talk to these guys, the confidence is not there right now in that group at all, and that's what they got to fix.
I don't think DeGuglielmo was the fix because of his career record.
I don't think he's the fix.
I'm speaking to. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not that was the right move to make and whether or not keeping him around. He does not have a good reputation around the league.
Right.
He's mostly been in places for 1 year. He's in college right now because the two places he went after Indianapolis, he flamed out of again. I think that too much of the 2018 offensive line success has been credited to the offensive to Guglielmo, and less to the fact of getting the right personnel together. Just because, like I said, this is a talking point, so I'm just giving my take on it based on what I've heard from around the league, more towards what people listening than anything here. But like, I don't know that like he doesn't have a history as a good offensive line coach. This isn't like Mike Munchak or somebody who's known as a guy that you get and you keep and you try to keep around as much as you can. This is a guy that no one wants to keep around. Now, as far as Strasser and the development goes, I think there's probably something to that. I think that I might be more. I think I would right now fall more on that the personnel issues are a bigger problem than because Danny Pinter should know what they're doing. He was a center for 2 years. Like that's the position that has to think the most on the offensive line. Like he should know. Without being told, he should know where the protections are headed and that kind of thing. Like mentally, he should have been ready to do that. And left tackle, I agree. Fisher wasn't good in pass protection last year. Much better in run blocking. But I think that if you make, to me it just seems like they were pretty good on the offensive line in 2019 and 2020 as well. Those are the years they had Anthony Costanzo. They were second in the league in sacks allowed in 2020 with Rivers. Part of that is Rivers getting the ball out as quickly as he did, which is another thing that I'm kind of frustrated with Matt Ryan. Or maybe that I didn't expect. I don't know how to phrase that. But I do think that the personnel gambles that they've taken without trying to add anybody who's a veteran who you could put in as a more reasonable – like Will Fries being put in there last week, well – I guess it kind of depends on Matt Ryan felt like the protection was better. So I think the pass protection was probably better. Run blocking wasn't great. But that's a guy who only played 22 snaps in an NFL game before last week. Like, they didn't add veteran players to compete with these guys. Not really. And I just don't I think that's it's egregious. It's egregious to not add veteran players. Even if they're low-money guys. I mean, they've had so much success with low-money interior offensive linemen here. I don't understand why you didn't – okay, you didn't re-sign Chris Reed. Go find the next Chris Reed. And it wasn't Jason Spriggs. Jason Spriggs has a terrible track record in the NFL. Reed had more of an uneven track record. He'd been better in spots. There was something maybe more to work with there. But if you're going to add Spriggs, add somebody else. Give them some veteran experience to work with. Do something – instead of signing Pryor for $5 million, put an extra couple million and get somebody better than Pryor or someone who's played left tackle before. I know he played well last year, but like, I think the personnel gambles that they took without veteran, experienced competition is significant. I'm not saying that Strasser and Mawai don't have something to do with this, but they needed to do more than they did. Ballard needed to do more than he did.
I think Ballard could have made better, more calculated decisions in some ways. We've brought up Charles Leno last year should have been the choice, and they went with Eric Fisher, and it doesn't look great. I'm still going to push back. I don't think the solution was spending more money. They've spent more money on this offensive line than any team in the NFL, and that's what so I go back to, yes, while we can question and we have the choices of Danny Pinter and Matt Pryor. The fact of the matter is they've got three. Those guys are not big money guys. Danny Pinter's on a rookie deal, and Matt Pryor was a Band-Aid. And that we're saying that's the problem is a Band-Aid. But the other three guys are supposed to be stars, and they've been really good players. Quentin Nelson may be the best lineman in football. Ryan Kelly's been a Pro Bowler, and Braden Smith, I think, has at times looked close to that. They clearly believe in it. The front office clearly believes in it. They've had high moments. And what I go back to at 2018 is not to say they shouldn't have moved on from the offensive line coach. It's just they didn't mess it up back then, and I think they're messing it up right now. And I think a lot of it, honestly, is I think they're kind of overthinking some things. This is a lot of negative energy from this offensive line right now, and it feels very much like the Lions one did in Detroit, where all those guys, once they moved on from that staff, all kind of had a positive reinforcement moment, and all of them took off. I mean, like, all of them became Pro Bowlers pretty much. And they can't get anyone to play like that right now. And I just think that is the most connected unit, where what one guy does affects the other guy. It is in that, and I put a ton on coaching on that unit. And I think if you look at some of the best teams, some of the worst teams in the NFL, it's coaching. I'll give you an example. The other team that is built so much like this Colts offensive line, from the spending to the positions they're building up, are the Browns. They've built Callahan as their offensive line coach, and that's been a top 5 rushing team and a team that's top 5 in sack rate. This Colts offensive line right now is bottom 5 in pass block win rate. They're bottom 5 in adjusted line yards, which is what they open up in the run game. Pretty much every metric you look at, they're in the bottom 5. And so if they overrated Danny Pinter and Matt Pryor, which seems like they did, I can understand them not being in line with their spending, which is number 1. I can understand them not being number 1. They're not as good as we probably thought that they were going to be. This should be a top 10 offensive line. At the very least, it should be an average offensive line when it's healthy, when it's together. The fact that it's not, it's either we totally overrated all those players, and Ryan Kelly and Braden Smith and Quentin Nelson were just never as good, and they confused us for a few years. Or what I think is more likely is that there's one common denominator that's the problem right now. It's the way they're coaching, developing, and honestly cultivating this group. And some of the quotes I'm getting out of the offensive line, they're not pointing fingers, but it feels like that Detroit offensive line, if they're so in their heads, they're so expecting to fail out there, they're afraid of failing. Matt Pryor recently told me that he's trying to build on the positives so he doesn't drown in the negatives. Bernard Raymond recently said he knows that any mistake he makes in a game, he's going to go over 1,000 times in the film room and be kind of raked over the coals for. Like, this is just these guys need to go like play some laser tag or something. Like, this needs to get a little bit more uplifting here. Is that the way they talk right now is like they expect to go out there and struggle again, and that is just not the way to turn this around. And this is what happens with losing and with struggle and with expectation, is that you get more in your own head, and the struggles deepen, the more that doubt creeps in, and the more that you try and fix it by yelling and being mad at each other. So they've got to flip a switch. They need some positive reinforcement. It feels exactly like that Detroit line did. And you know what happened there is once they cleared out that coaching staff and they moved on, and Dan Campbell's guys right now have maybe one of the best offensive lines in football, probably the happiest and most together offensive line in football. It makes a world of a difference, and that's the switch I think they need.
Yeah, it's probably some of both. That's the hard thing with this Colts team right now, is that no matter what you end up talking about, if you zero in on any one thing, you end up not giving enough credit to the other thing. Like, it's the hard part with our stories. I think every week, whatever we write off of the game, someone says, like, I don't know why you would put so much blame on this person and ignore these other things. Well, what's usually going on there is that you, me, and Greg are writing on every game, and we split that up. We split that stuff up so that, like, if you're looking at the Stars coverage, if you're going to the Stars website, you're going to get the full thing. But we have the ability to break stuff down and just focus on one thing. You know, the problem is, like I said, with this team, everything affects something else.
Right.
And so, like, with Jonathan Taylor, he missed some holes, I think. It looked more like the first couple weeks of his rookie season when he wasn't sure. Now, what you wrote, I think, is right, because what he said about his rookie year when he was struggling was that he wasn't used to seeing stuff that way. He was, he hadn't run out of the shotgun. It's very different running out of the shotgun. He wasn't used to seeing the way the holes close, all that stuff opens up. And he looks like that again because he doesn't see stuff opening the way it's supposed to. And so he's uncertain. But he is missing holes, So he did on Sunday, I felt like. And so it all compounds on top of it. Now, trying to assign percentage points to, what's worse or than anything else is tough. And like I said, the moment you start talking about one thing that's gone wrong with this team in depth, then inevitably you're ignoring something that something else that's going on. And honestly, it's probably one of the hardest things about covering this team right now is trying to write anything that's illuminating without just writing it's all bad, because it is all bad right now. And normally what you do is you take whatever the overarching story is and you try to break it down. But most people don't want to hear that right now. Most people just want to hear like it's all bad. But that's not a story you can write every day.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And there's like the thing is, there's two ways the conversation could go. If we're citing blame, then there's a lot of areas we can go to, and Jonathan Taylor is an example of that. As I agree, he fumbled, which he rarely does, but he did, and it was a tough moment to fumble. I think it was injury related, but nonetheless it happened. And then he's not picking up, he's not setting up runs the way he did. He's not seeing outside creases. So one conversation is about blame. I think the other conversation, the one that Reich's having, is about solutions and what would actually solve some of this. And I think that offensive line, if they block the way they did last year, we're going to see Jonathan Taylor be exactly what he was before. I don't see what, like we talked about, like Frank Reich didn't forget how to do certain things over the years. I don't think Jonathan Taylor's forgotten how to do anything, and we'll see how his ankle is now. But up until that moment with the ankle, there was no sort of health. I guess he did have a little bit of a toe issue, but this season he has not run the way that anything close like he did last year. And so I still think the fix for him and for Matt Ryan and for everything is the offensive line. And that's why I think there's a real chance this turns around in a pretty shocking way. I'm not saying it will. If they don't find this fix, it won't. Right now I think they're going to sink or swim with this offensive line at this point, because I don't see Matt Ryan thriving at 37 years old with this pass protection issue and his lack of trust. I don't see them being great if Jonathan Taylor can't get going. And then it spills over into defense, where I don't see them forcing turnovers the way they did last year if they're never playing with a lead, and they can never kind of have moments, situational football, where they can force a team to throw. But the fix is on the offensive line. If they're able to find it, and I trust Frank Reich to diagnose it at least, and to do his best effort. This is how they get out of these holes. Like, they start poorly in the season, and there's something really dragging them down, and Frank Reich goes and addresses it. And I wasn't here for a lot of those, but I would have to guess last year when they started 0-3, it sounded like a lot of that was tied to the passing game and Carson Wentz.
Personnel at right tackle,
and some personnel, but they got through it. I mean, they made it better.
They switched the right tackle.
Right, they switched to right tackle, and then Carson, his ankles got better, he got more comfortable, and he really was on a hot stretch there. And then they unleashed Jonathan Taylor, and it all came together, and and then it didn't work out at the end of the season. But Frank Reich has such a track record for fixing issues, diagnosing them. I feel very confident he will find out what the issue is on this offensive line. Does he actually take it to the level he needs to fix it? We'll see. He's done it in the past, but this one, if it's what I wonder if it is, if it would require a coaching change, I think a midseason coaching change would be something new for him, I'm guessing. So it's going to test some things. It's not just as simple as repeat what you've done to climb out of the past holes, but I still think the track record's there, and I think the upside is so big if they can fix this offensive line to get Matt Ryan comfortable, to get their defense playing with leads, and then to get Jonathan Taylor out in the open field, where we're talking about the difference right now in them figuring it out is a 1-yard gain or a 60-yard gain. That's the Jonathan Taylor effect. They've got to bring it back out. If they can bring him back out of the dirt and get him running wild again, I honestly think this could be a really good football team, the same way we thought coming into the year.
Yeah, be nice to Nate, podcast listeners. One of the other hard things is, like, normally when a team is struggling, you do write about solutions, but trying to go a little inside baseball with what we're thinking. It's hard to write about solutions because no one wants to hear it. Like, I think the most common refrain from most people is just, it's over. There's no point. The team can't operate that way. They have to play a lot more games.
They have to find solutions.
You can't play games like that. You just can't. And it does make it hard. It does make it hard because the moment you start talking or writing about solutions, no one wants to hear it. That's the best way to put it. There's other ways I could put it that are harsher, but that no one wants to hear it right now. But you're right. If they get the offensive line playing better, there's been signs in the passing game. You're getting something from Alec Pierce. You're getting something from Jelani Woods. What happened with the tight ends last week? They had 11 catches on 11 targets. Maybe there's something they can build on with some of this wide receiver core, and tight end core. You assume that if they get the running game going and get some more first down, or get more yardage on first and second down, then Matt Ryan isn't in third and long, doesn't have to take a 5 to 7 step drop, and he's got a better chance at getting the ball out, and he gets hit less. There's a path that's out. It's just the hard part right now is nobody wants to hear that at all.
Yeah. Well, the other hard part about solutions is that it's harder for us. It's easier to diagnose the problems and harder to find solutions. That's true for coaches. That's true for us, because I want to be careful with this. I can figure out – I think the problem is, like I've said, the way that this offensive line is operating, coaching, teaching, developing, all of that. I can't necessarily always pin it on one person. We're not there in the meeting rooms. We're not there in the practice.
Though. You kind of just did.
I put it on 2 people to fix it, but I don't know if it's as simple as fire a coach and it gets better. But the problem is that something is not working there, and so that's what's tough about this. It's I don't want to call it for somebody's job, but I kind of am, because
you did. Yeah, you did.
I'll say this. Those 2 coaches, they have to do it differently. They have to completely revamp how this is going. If they continue to do it this way, where they just try out the same 5 guys out there, scream at them every week, try and fire them up, talk about, trying to not drown in the negatives, and it's not working. It's just not working. So something has got to change there. That's kind of where I'm at with it. And when I look at we've talked all about the offense. I mentioned when you talk about the defense, we were critical of them on Sunday for creating the hole, for not making a tough turnover.
Basically, the thing that the defense hasn't done well so far is they have not reacted to big moments well. So when a turnover happens, when they're given a short field, they haven't situationally they have not played well. Overall, their numbers look better than. It's sort of a mirage thing, with Matt Ryan's 356 passing yards. There is good in there, but in terms of winning the game, the situational defense hasn't been there yet.
Yeah. And
outside of Kansas City.
And I think there's a couple things for that. Number one, I think, and this is just reality, is that they're getting a lot of the scores they're giving up are on sudden change moments, like a fumble, a moment like that. They've got to be tighter in those moments, but at the same time, that does take a toll on the defense. And that's where, if they cut down on the fumbles, that helps a little bit too, is they're not kind of rushed out there before they want to be, and they're not, they're given a short field where, yes, I like we said on Sunday, they've got to force some field goals. Don't just give up a touchdown. At the same time, if they're taking over at the opponent's 20, they can make one mistake that gets them to the 50 and maybe correct then. They're getting put in some tough situations. The thing I think about is, correct me if I'm wrong, they've had 1 second half lead this season, right, against Kansas City for one final drive?
Correct.
And they picked off Patrick Mahomes.
They've outscored teams 24-0 in the fourth quarter. The Colts have.
Yeah. But the one game, Texans had sent it to overtime. They came back on the Chiefs and scored very late, and the Chiefs got one drive, and then they threw a pick. They need to be in more situations like that. They've got to force throws. The thing I keep thinking about with the Titans is that team does not beat themselves. That's why Mike Vrabel, he keeps figuring this out, even though I don't always think his offense is that great, is that when they can get a lead 24-3, they will not ruin it with turnovers. It doesn't mean they're perfect, but in Ryan Tannehill, I noticed that it was a lot of quick passes, easy passes. They got to defend those better, but when it wasn't open, he was just taking it, tucking it, getting the yards that were there and going down. They've got to get to a point where they are making you make the throw to convert 3rd and 10 because you were trailing. And that's what they did against Patrick Mahomes. Stephon Gilmore reaches in, tips it up, and it just has an effect. The pass rushers, they can pin their ears back. The defensive backs can key in on the quarterback knowing he's going to throw. They can build throughout a game. It's just not happening this way. They're not getting to the strengths of what I think this defense is, which is the pass rush abilities of Yannick Ngakoue and DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, and then the cerebral nature of their defensive backs in Stephon Gilmore and Kenny Moore. Those guys are not playing they're not in enough situations where they can jump on routes with throws you have to make that they know are coming. They've got to get to more of that, and I still think the fix is an offense that's not broken, because right now the defense, they're not carrying it. They carried it for the Chiefs game. They're not winning the game on their own. They also shouldn't be expected to be. I think that defense would play a lot better if they could not be put in such bad situations.
Getting close to going out to the Colts facility for really the only big day of the week in terms of access and availability. That's just the way Thursday weeks work. I mean, they have to fly to Denver tomorrow, just like the rest of us do. But for the Colts Cover 2 podcast, I'm Joel A. Erickson. This has been Nate Atkins. Nate now has to clean up a bunch of dirt. That's the other thing. A lot of time. He's got to clean up dirt.
Hey, no pain, no game.
We'll be back after the Denver game.